The blizzard had swallowed the border town whole. Roads vanished. Power lines snapped. The cold was so brutal, it felt like it could stop a heartbeat in seconds. But for one, U.S. Marine Corporal Daniel Hayes, the storm was nothing compared to what he had survived overseas. Still, nothing could have prepared him for what he found that morning, while checking on an abandoned cabin near the ridge. He froze literally and emotionally on a wooden bench outside. Covered in sheets of ice sat 3 German Shepherd puppies. Their fur was stiff, frozen solid, icicles hanging from their tiny chests. They didn't bark, didn't move. They only stared at him. Pleading, silent, fading. Daniel ripped off his gloves, his breath shaking. Oh God, who did this? He didn't know that saving these 3 freezing puppies would uncover a secret, buried deep in the border town, a secret so shocking it would shake the entire community to its core. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The blizzard roared across the border town like a living beast, swallowing everything in its path. Snow hammered the ground in furious waves, burying roads, fences, and rooftops under thick layers of white. Most residents had locked themselves inside hours ago. But one man still moved through the storm, his silhouette steady, disciplined, and unshaken. U.S. Marine Corporal Daniel Hayes tugged his scarf tighter around his face as he trudged through knee-deep snow, each step crunching sharply under his boots. He had been sent to check the old ranger cabins after the power lines snapped, but truthfully, he didn't mind the isolation. The storm outside matched the storm inside him. Daniel paused near a ridge, catching his breath as the wind howled violently. The cold bit into his skin, even through layers of military-grade fabric. But something pushed him forward, a gut feeling, the same instinct that had saved his life overseas more than once. He swept his flashlight across the snow-covered tree line, watching flakes dance chaotically in the beam. Then he saw it. A shape, no. Several shapes huddled on a wooden bench beside the abandoned cabin. At first he thought it was debris, maybe branches or a pile of frost-covered gear left behind. But as he squinted, his heart lurched. Those weren't objects. They were small, still, breathing shapes. He stepped forward quickly, the snow crunching faster beneath him. His pulse climbed as he closed the distance. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. 3 tiny German Shepherd puppies sat frozen together. Their fur stiff with ice, their bodies glazed in layers of frost. Icicles hung from their chests and whiskers like crystal daggers. Their eyes opened slowly, heavy, barely alive. They didn't whine, didn't move. They simply watched him with silent, desperate resignation. Daniel dropped to his knees, breath trembling. "Oh God, what happened to you?" he whispered, reaching out gently. The puppies flinched at his touch, weak, helpless. Fading. The Marine inside him reacted instantly. Survival mode, protection mode. No hesitation. He scooped them carefully into his arms, holding them against his chest as the storm roared around him. Whatever happened next, he would not let these puppies die. Daniel tightened his grip on the freezing puppies, feeling their tiny bodies trembling against his chest. The moment his bare hands touched their icy fur, a sharp sting shot through his fingers, but he didn't care. Their lives mattered more than the biting cold. He shielded them with his arms, blocking the brutal wind as he knelt beside the bench, trying to understand how they ended up here. The snow piled around them so deeply, it was clear they had been trapped in the storm for hours. Too long, far too long for puppies this small to survive. The thought made Daniel's stomach twist. He gently brushed the frost from the first puppy's face. Its eyes fluttered halfway open before drooping again, as though even blinking required too much strength. The second tried to shift, but its tiny legs gave out, sliding helplessly across the iced bench. The third didn't move at all. It just stared at him with a frozen, distant emptiness that sent a surge of fear through him. "Stay with me. Please stay with me," Daniel whispered, his voice cracking in the storm's roar. He checked their breathing, shallow, uneven, dangerously slow. These puppies weren't just cold. They were on the brink of hypothermia. If he didn't act now, he would lose them. The Marine in him kicked into overdrive. He wrapped the puppies inside his jacket, pressing them against the warmth of his body. Their tiny hearts fluttered weakly against his ribs. He could feel life slipping, thread by fragile thread. Daniel looked around quickly. No footprints. No tire marks. No signs of a human being anywhere. Whoever left them here had either vanished in the storm or wanted them to die. Anger sparked in his chest, sharp and hot. "Who would do this to you?" he muttered, jaw tightening. A violent gust of wind nearly knocked him off balance, but he clutched the puppies closer. He had no time to think about motives, no time for questions. Their survival depended on immediate action. Daniel rose to his feet. Heart pounding with urgency, he had made his decision. He would get these puppies to safety, no matter what the storm had planned for him next. Daniel staggered forward through the blizzard. The 3 freezing puppies tucked tightly inside his jacket as he fought against the storm's fury. The wind slammed into him like a wall, pushing him sideways with every step. Snow whipped across his face, stinging his skin, blurring his vision. But he never loosened his grip. The puppy's faint, fragile breaths pressed against his chest, reminding him what was at stake. Every second mattered. Every step could decide their fate. The path back to his cabin was barely visible. The snow had swallowed the trail he came from, turning everything into a white, shifting maze. Daniel lowered his head, shoulders hunched against the relentless cold, and powered forward with the stubborn determination only a Marine could muster. His boots sank deep into the drifts, each step heavier than the last, but he pushed on. Stopping wasn't an option, not when those tiny lives depended on him. About halfway to the cabin, one of the puppies twitched weakly inside his jacket. Daniel froze. He quickly checked them, feeling with trembling fingers. The smallest one's breathing was almost non-existent. "Hang on, please," he whispered, his breath fogging the air. Panic scratched at the edges of his composure, but he forced himself to remain steady. He couldn't lose them now, not after coming this far. He broke into a slow, determined run, ignoring the burning ache in his legs. The storm howled louder, as if trying to drown him, bury him, stop him. But Daniel's focus sharpened with every painful stride. His cabin's dark shape finally emerged through the blinding white solid. Safe close, heart pounding, breath sharp and heavy. He lunged toward the porch. He didn't know how much time the puppies had left, but he knew this. He wasn't letting them die on his watch. Daniel kicked the cabin door shut behind him. Snow scattering across the wooden floor as he rushed inside. The sudden warmth of the small room wrapped around him, but the puppies pressed against his chest remained frighteningly cold. He hurried to the fireplace, where glowing embers still flickered weakly. Dropping to his knees, he adjusted the logs with shaking hands and fanned the embers until flames leapt alive, crackling with heat. Only when the fire roared steadily did he unzip his jacket, revealing the 3 tiny bodies he held like treasure. He placed them gently on a thick wool blanket near the fire. Their fur, stiff with ice, began to melt into droplets that soaked the fabric. Daniel grabbed towels from a nearby cabinet and began rubbing their little bodies, careful yet desperate. "Come on," he whispered, voice trembling. "Stay with me. Just a little longer." He checked their breathing, still shallow, still dangerously slow. The smallest puppy's chest barely rose. Panic surged through him like a punch. He immediately lifted the pup into his hands, rubbing faster, warming its tiny paws with his breath. "Don't you quit on me," he muttered, his tone cracking under the pressure. Memories of battlefield rescues flashed behind his eyes, wounded soldiers slipping away in his arms. The guilt of not saving them all. He refused to relive that pain tonight. Not with these puppies. The second puppy let out a faint whimper. It was barely audible, but to Daniel, it was a spark of hope. "Good, good," he murmured, moving closer to the fire. He wrapped the other two in a dry blanket and placed warm water bottles nearby, creating a makeshift heating nest. Steam rose from their fur as the frost melted away, revealing soft patches of brown and black beneath. Minutes felt like hours. The storm thundered outside, shaking the cabin walls, but Daniel heard nothing except the fragile breaths in front of him. His hands moved steadily, expertly, military training fused with pure human instinct. Then, just as he leaned in to check their breathing again, one puppy's tiny paw twitched. It was small, almost invisible, but it was life, and Daniel felt hope ignite inside him like fire. As Daniel continued warming the puppies, his hands moving with steady purpose, a familiar heaviness settled in his chest. The crackling fire, the faint whimpers, the quiet desperation, it all triggered memories he had tried so hard to bury. He paused for a moment, staring into the flames as the past bled into the present, drawing him back to a desert battlefield thousands of miles away. He remembered the night his unit was ambushed, the chaos erupting like a thunderstorm. Gunfire, sand, smoke, everything blurred together except for one constant: his military canine partner, Shadow. The German Shepherd had saved Daniel's life more times than he could count. But on their final mission, when an explosion ripped through the convoy, Shadow shielded Daniel from the blast. Daniel survived. Shadow didn't. Losing him shattered something inside Daniel that no metal could fix. When he returned home, the border town felt quieter but strangely empty. Everyone said time would heal him, but months passed, and the guilt only grew. He withdrew from crowds, avoided celebrations, and found solace only in long walks through the woods and silent nights by the fire. Saving others had been his life's purpose, yet he hadn't been able to save the one creature who loved him unconditionally. That failure haunted him. Looking at the 3 freezing puppies now, he felt that familiar ache twist deeper. But this time, something else mixed with the pain, something fierce, powerful, and unmistakably alive. A second chance. Not to erase the past, but to honor it. Daniel reached out and brushed his fingers gently over the smallest puppy's head. "I couldn't save him," he whispered, voice low and raw. "But I'm not losing any of you." Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, Daniel's resolve hardened. This rescue was no coincidence. It was redemption. The cabin felt warmer now, but Daniel's nerves only tightened. He hovered over the puppies, his hands steady but his heartbeat unsteady. 2 of them showed small signs of improvement, barely audible breaths, soft twitches beneath the blanket, but the smallest remained frighteningly still. Daniel cupped the tiny body in his palms, warming it with his breath, rubbing gently, whispering encouragement like prayers. "Come on, little one. Stay with me." His voice cracked, a tremor of fear slipping through the marine steel he usually carried. Then, without warning, the second puppy let out a sharp, sudden cry, a thin, high-pitched sound that sliced through the quiet room. Daniel jolted, his heart leaping. The puppy wriggled weakly, its tiny paws searching for warmth. Relief washed over him, leaving his shoulders trembling. "That's it. That's good," he murmured, moving the pup closer to the fire. Steam rose gently from its thawing fur, but before Daniel could breathe fully, the largest puppy's breathing hitched. Its small chest rose once, twice, then stopped for several terrifying seconds. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He scooped the pup into his hands and began rubbing firmly, mimicking the field resuscitation techniques he had learned in combat. "Not now. Not you too," he whispered urgently. His thumbs moved with precision, his breath warm against the puppy's muzzle. Seconds crawled by like hours, then a twitch. A gasp. A weak, trembling breath. Daniel exhaled shakily, closing his eyes for a moment of gratitude. All 3 puppies were clinging to life, but they were still far from safe. Hypothermia was unpredictable. Even with heat and care, setbacks could happen in moments. He leaned closer, monitoring each tiny movement, refusing to blink for fear of missing something critical. But then something else caught his attention. The puppies' noses twitched almost in unison. Their heads shifted weakly, their ears flickering toward the cabin door. Daniel frowned. They were reacting to something outside. Something they smelled. Something close. A low, uneasy feeling crept up his spine. The storm raged, the wind howled. Yet beneath it, he sensed something alive out there. Something struggling to reach him. Daniel stood slowly, eyes fixed on the door. Whatever was coming next. He wasn't ready for it. Daniel moved toward the front door cautiously, every instinct sharpening as the puppies continued reacting to something outside. Their faint whimpers rose and fell, not in fear but recognition. It unsettled him. Snow hammered the cabin walls, rattling the windows like brittle glass. But beneath the storm's chaos, Daniel sensed something living. Struggling just beyond the porch, he grabbed his flashlight, pulled on his coat, and pushed the door open. A blast of freezing wind hit him square in the face, forcing him to brace himself against the wooden frame. The storm had worsened. Snow swirled violently across the clearing, turning the world into a ghostly white blur. Yet something in that blur didn't belong. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the ground carefully. That's when he saw them. Tracks. Fresh ones. Uneven, dragging, circling near the steps. They weren't human footprints. They were paw prints, small and delicate, but accompanied by larger grooves, as if something had stumbled repeatedly, collapsing and getting back up. Daniel crouched down, brushing the snow aside to study them more closely. The marks led toward the bench where he found the puppies earlier, then curved around the cabin, as if whatever made them had wandered in confusion, desperate and weak. A chill crawled across Daniel's spine. "You weren't alone," he whispered under his breath. The realization hit him hard. Someone, or something, had been trying to stay close to the puppies, even in the deadly storm. He followed the tracks a few more feet until the wind swallowed the trail completely. The storm had erased the rest, leaving only fragments of a struggle. But one thing was clear. The puppies hadn't been abandoned randomly. Something or someone had stayed with them until the very end. And whatever it was might still be out there, fighting to survive. Daniel stepped back inside the cabin, the warmth hitting his frozen skin in a rush. He shut the door quickly, shaking off the snow clinging to his coat. The puppies lay bundled near the fire, their tiny bodies rising and falling slowly, weak but alive. He knelt beside them for a moment, reassuring himself that they were still fighting. But the uneasiness in his gut refused to settle. Those tracks outside. Something about them gnawed at him. After one last glance at the pups, he grabbed his radio from the shelf. Static crackled through the small cabin until he adjusted the dial. "Sheriff Mason, this is Hayes. Do you copy?" His voice was steady, but edged with urgency. A moment later, the sheriff's familiar voice broke through. "Copy, Hayes. Everything all right up there?" Daniel took a breath. Found 3 abandoned puppies outside the old ranger cabin. Severe hypothermia. And Sheriff. Someone or something stayed with them. Tracks are fresh. Weak gait. Could be injured. There was a pause too long to be casual. "Hayes," Mason finally replied, voice low. "This might be connected to something we've been looking into." Daniel straightened, adrenaline flickering. "Connected how?" "We've had reports of illegal breeding operations along the border," the sheriff said grimly. "Animals dumped when they're no longer profitable. Or when the mother gets sick." Daniel's jaw tightened. He looked at the puppies again, imagining what cruelty they had already endured. Whoever did this didn't just abandon them, he said. They left them to die in the storm. Stay put, Sheriff Mason ordered. Roads are a mess, but I'll get a deputy up there as soon as possible. And Hayes, be careful. If the mother's still out there, she might be hurt. Or desperate. Daniel's eyes drifted toward the door, the faint sound of the storm muffling everything. He had a feeling the sheriff was right, and whatever was coming next wasn't over. The storm howled louder as Daniel set the radio aside, its faint static fading into the background. He turned back toward the puppies, two of them shifting weakly beneath the blanket, the smallest still frighteningly still. He moved closer to check their breathing again when a sudden sound cut through the cabin walls, a thud. Soft but desperate. Daniel froze. Another thud followed, this one heavier, closer. Something was outside his door. The puppies reacted instantly. All three, even the weakest, let out faint whimpers and strained their tiny heads toward the sound. Their reaction wasn't fear. It was recognition, deep and instinctive. Daniel's pulse quickened. He grabbed his flashlight, moved toward the door, and listened closely. Through the roar of the blizzard came a low, pained whine, a sound so heart-wrenching it tightened every muscle in his chest. He yanked the door open. Snow blasted into the cabin, swirling around him like white fire, but his attention locked instantly onto the shape collapsed on the porch. A large German shepherd lay there, her body trembling violently, her fur matted with ice, patches of frost covering her sides. She tried lifting her head at the sight of Daniel, but it fell back weakly onto the wooden planks. Oh my God! Daniel breathed, dropping to his knees. It was their mother. Her ribs were visible beneath her fur, her breathing slow and shallow. Snow clung to her eyelashes and blood, a thin, dark trail lined the edge of her paw. She must have been circling the cabin for hours, searching for her puppies through the storm until her strength finally gave out. How did you even make it this far? Daniel whispered, sliding his arms beneath her fragile body. She flinched in pain but made no attempt to resist. Her eyes clouded, exhausted, shifted toward the sound of the puppies crying inside. A single tear-like drop of melted snow rolled down her cheek. Daniel scooped her into his arms with gentle urgency, lifting her against his chest. She was ice cold. Too cold. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind him. Heart pounding. Saving the puppies had been critical, but saving their mother might be the hardest battle yet. Daniel laid the mother dog gently beside the puppies, his movements careful, almost reverent. The firelight washed over her trembling body, revealing just how close she was to complete collapse. Her breathing came in ragged, uneven pulls, each one sounding like it cost her everything she had left. Daniel pressed two fingers to her neck. Her pulse fluttered weakly there, but fading fast. No, stay with me, he murmured, his voice tight with urgency. He grabbed another blanket, warmed it near the fire, then wrapped it around her shaking form. The mother whimpered softly, but her eyes stayed fixed on her puppies. Even in her suffering, her instincts remained unbroken. She nudged forward weakly, dragging herself closer until her nose brushed the edge of the blanket covering them. Her body went still, as if simply reaching them had taken the last of her strength. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He had seen soldiers make that same desperate crawl, one final push to reach the people they loved, before darkness claimed them. He refused to let that happen here. Not again. He filled a bowl with warm water and dipped a cloth inside, then began rubbing the mother's paws, legs, and sides in slow circles. He worked with practiced precision, the same way he had treated wounded Marines under battlefield pressure. Come on, girl. Fight, he whispered. Her fur began to soften as the ice melted away, steam rising gently into the air. Suddenly, she jerked her chest, seizing as if struggling for breath. Daniel's heart slammed against his ribs. He lifted her head, steadying her, keeping her airway open. "Breathe. Breathe," he urged, refusing to let fear take over. For several tense seconds, she lay motionless. Then a weak inhale, another. Her chest rose in small, shaky movements. Daniel exhaled sharply, relief flooding him. But he knew they weren't safe yet. Hypothermia could rebound. Injuries could worsen. And the thin line between life and death stretched dangerously close. He kept working, refusing to stop. Refusing to blink. He had lost one German shepherd in his arms. Before, he would not lose another tonight. Daniel worked in silence, eyes fixed on the mother dog as her breathing steadied into fragile, uneven rhythms. Outside, the storm pounded the cabin relentlessly, but inside, a heavy stillness settled, a quiet filled with worry, fear, and unanswered questions. When the mother finally stopped shivering as violently, Daniel eased back and reached for his phone. He dialed the town's only emergency vet, Dr. Marlowe, explaining the situation in rushed, clipped sentences. The vet agreed to come immediately despite the dangerous weather. 20 agonizing minutes later, headlights cut through the blizzard outside. Daniel opened the door as Dr. Marlowe hurried in, snow clinging to his coat. "You weren't kidding," the vet muttered, kneeling beside the wounded shepherd. He examined her quickly, professionally, but the deeper he looked, the more tension crept into his expression. "Hypothermia is severe," he murmured. "But that's not all." He gently lifted the dog's paw, revealing dried blood beneath her fur. "These aren't storm injuries. She's been running for a long time. Through barbed wire, maybe." He checked her ribs next, pressing lightly. She whimpered in pain. Multiple bruises. Possibly kicked. And this. He parted the fur along her flank. A thin line, fresh, swollen, ran across her skin. Daniel's heart darkened. Someone hurt her. Dr. Marlowe nodded grimly. "And look at this." He shone his light on the puppies, lifting each one gently. Their newborns may be a few weeks old, but malnourished, severely. He paused, his voice lowering. "Daniel, these puppies weren't just abandoned. They escaped something." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Illegal breeding?" "Or worse," Marlowe replied. "These injuries, the starvation, the timing, it all points to exploitation." He looked Daniel in the eye. "She didn't leave her puppies. She fled with them." The realization hit like a punch. The mother had fought through a storm, through pain, through whatever cruelty she'd endured, just to keep her puppies alive. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest, not from the fire, but from anger. Cold, controlled, military anger. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was the beginning of a truth that would shake the border town to its core. The storm eased slightly by morning, leaving the world outside blanketed in thick, unforgiving snow. With the puppies sleeping in a warm bundle and the mother stabilized under Dr. Marlowe's care, Daniel finally stepped outside again, this time with purpose. The vet's words echoed in his mind like distant thunder. She didn't abandon them. She fled with them. That meant someone dangerous was out there. Someone cruel enough to torture an innocent animal and dump her newborn puppies in a storm. Daniel followed the faint remains of the tracks he'd seen the night before. The storm had erased most of the trail, but years of military training sharpened his instincts. He scanned the terrain, studying broken snowdrifts, disturbed branches, tiny flecks of blood embedded in the ice. "You were hurt, and still kept going," he whispered, tracing the pattern the mother dog must have followed. He pressed on toward the tree line, the air biting at his cheeks. After several minutes of hiking uphill, something caught his eye, a thin wisp of smoke rising beyond a cluster of pines. Not enough to signal life. More like the dying remains of a fire someone tried to extinguish quickly. Daniel approached quietly, steps deliberate, breath controlled. When he reached the clearing, his jaw hardened. An old cabin, smaller, more hidden than the ranger one sat crooked against the trees. Its windows were boarded from the inside, and a heavy chain hung from the door's latch. Snow piled against the cabin walls, but fresh footprints circled the structure. Not animal footprints, human. He stepped closer, spotting something half buried under the snow. A metal cage. Rusted, bent, the door torn open. Inside were tufts of German shepherd fur and deep scratch marks. Desperate ones. His chest tightened. "You kept them in here," he muttered, fury simmering. He swept his flashlight across the ground, landing on another horrifying sight: discarded syringes, open bags of cheap dog food, and a rag stained with dried blood. This wasn't a shelter. This was a breeding den, and someone had left in a hurry. Daniel straightened, muscles tensing, instincts flaring. Whoever ran this operation was close, and he wasn't done with his animals yet. Daniel's breath fogged the cold air as he crouched near the abandoned breeding shack, studying the fresh footprints circling the cabin. Whoever ran this operation was still nearby, maybe even watching him now. The tracks led away from the cabin and down a narrow slope toward the frozen creek. The storm had softened them, but not enough to erase their urgency. Whoever fled did so fast. And recently, he followed the trail, moving low and silent, every sense sharp. Years of combat had trained him to hear danger before seeing it. And then he heard it: a quick shuffle, the crunch of snow, followed by a muttered curse. A figure darted behind a cluster of fallen trees. Daniel stiffened, eyes narrowing. "Sheriff's office." He shouted into the wind, "Step out where I can see you." Silence. Then the figure bolted. Daniel surged forward, boots hammering against the snow, heart pounding with controlled fury. The man sprinted awkwardly, slipping through the drifts, stumbling as he tried to escape. His coat flapped wildly, revealing patches of torn fabric and the faint outline of something metallic beneath it. Daniel caught up within seconds, grabbing the man's arm and tackling him into the snow. The stranger kicked wildly, screaming, "Get off me! You don't understand." Daniel pinned him harder. "You abandoned newborn puppies in a blizzard. I understand enough." The man froze. For a moment, his expression shifted from panic to something colder, something unnervingly defiant. "They were mine," he spat. "Worth money. The mother ruined everything when she escaped." Daniel's stomach twisted. "So you left the puppies to die? They were weak." The man snapped. "Not worth keeping." The words ignited something deep and dangerous inside Daniel. He yanked the man upright, eyes burning with barely controlled rage. "You tortured them. You starved their mother. And you think you can just walk away?" Before the man could answer, another voice echoed through the clearing. "Marine Hayes. Step back." Sheriff Mason and two deputies emerged from the trees. Guns drawn, the man's eyes widened with sudden fear, because now his crimes weren't a secret. Justice had arrived in the storm. Sheriff Mason's deputies hauled the breeder to his feet, his wrists locked in cuffs as he spat curses into the wind. Daniel didn't look at him again. His attention drifted back toward the hidden cabin, toward the animals that might still be suffering inside. Mason seemed to read his mind. "Go," the sheriff said quietly. "We'll handle him." Daniel nodded once and jogged up the slope, heart pounding, breath fogging the cold air. Inside the shack, the smell hit him: first fear, damp straw, and neglect. He swept his flashlight across the cramped interior. Then his heart sank. 3 more dogs, thin, trembling, but alive, huddled in the corner, their eyes wide with terror. One limped forward, tail tucked, ribs pressing sharply against its skin. "Easy, it's okay now," Daniel murmured, kneeling down. The dogs hesitated, then inched closer, drawn to the warmth in his voice. Soon, deputies arrived with blankets and carriers. Together, they transported every animal out of the shack. The storm had softened by then, and patches of pale sunlight broke through the clouds. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the town's main road, people were waiting, neighbors, shop owners, families bundled in scarves and coats. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they saw the rescued dogs. A local woman stepped forward, tears streaking down her wind-chilled face. "Who did this?" she whispered. When Mason explained, anger erupted, frustration, grief, disbelief.